I definitely think that's true. I think at a principles level, you want to be very judicious in how you do that, because my concern in a lot of cases is that students will get turned off if they aren't sure quite what's going on, and they say, oh, there's this debate, I'm not sure what to think, I don't know what's going on, I'm so new to this is sort of overwhelming. So you definitely want to use blogs somewhat judiciously in that way, just to make sure that, again, enlightening rather than confusing. The other main downside that I personally find, and that's again something that's been echoed by the other panelists, is that I try to write a blog that relates funny things, relates current events, relates comics, videos, whatever it may be, to econ principles. Because one of my projects is then to link that information to actual principles content that's available online, either via video or in written form. This is a harder task than you would think, because, like you're saying, people in the newspaper very rarely use the word elasticity in their discussion. So it's actually a really big challenge to sit there and think about and to curate content that is directly applicable to principles content. And sometimes we have to be sort of creative. We have to, if you squint and turn your head sideways, this kind of looks like a marginal cost discussion, I don't know. And really, it's a harder task than I would like it to be. And in a perfect world, people would know more economics and they would use this jargon, they would use these concepts in popular writing so that they would make my job easier. But unfortunately, we're not at that point yet, but I think that everyone on this stage is trying to get us more in that direction. Yeah, so the main drawback and the main warning I would give you if you're starting your own blog is that you want to be a little bit flexible, both in timing. You don't want to commit to putting something out there every day. It's a lot of pressure. And you also don't want to be so narrow in your focus that you feel like you either have to compromise quality or compromise keeping in line with the mission that you've put out there as this blog. And if you're putting this blog out there, this is my voice, this is what I find interesting, you kind of can't go wrong, but then it's hard for people who don't know you to decide whether or not they want to engage with that. On the other hand, if you put out, this is what I'm doing very specifically, it's sometimes difficult to keep within that specific focus. So that's something to think about if you decide that you're in fact going to start blogging as a classroom resource or just for general interest yourself. The last thing I wanted to talk about is for people who do want to use blogs of others, how to do so effectively. Just give you some tips and things to think about, some of which may be obvious, some hopefully less obvious. So the first thing that I would say is it's really important to subscribe to a variety of blogs. That it's not necessarily helpful to say, okay, I'm going to use blogs in my classroom, so I'm going to pick this one, find the examples that are relevant, and just keep referring back to that same thing. That it's going to be a much more valuable experience for your students and also an easier experience for you if you're actually looking at a number of different blogs. And we've seen a number of examples of that, just here today, that there is no shortage of content out there, no shortage of variety out there. It's just a matter of how to find it. So my recommendation in that situation would be just start looking at a few blogs. Look at our blogs. See what we link to. Usually the way that blogs are set up is that you have some sort of sidebar where the blogs can put links to other blogs that they like. So you can follow that, that breadcrumb trail a little bit and say, okay, here are a few, let's see what they link to. Okay, let's check those out, let's see whether I like those. Let's see what they link to, and you can continue that process and start building your own library of blogs that you feel are appropriate for you and for your course. As a secondary point to that, you can say, well, how do I do that? That sounds sort of overwhelming. Do I have all these things bookmarked? Do I look at them all individually? What do I do? And if you don't already do so, RSS readers are your friend. If you're not familiar, RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. And a good example of an RSS reader is Google Reader, although there are a number of them out there. And what these readers do is they'll aggregate all this blog content for you. So rather than having to go to each one individually and see, oh, did they put up something new today? No, okay, I'll come back tomorrow. That you can actually have all of this coming to you in a, I'll say, condensed, consistent, easy to read format, and then it becomes a game of just going through the headlines and seeing what appeals to you. So it's definitely what I recommend to do, because as an instructor, one of the main challenges you're going to have, because you're getting this new content every day, you definitely want to keep up with it, and you want to have an organized way to do so. I like the subscribing to a variety of blogs, and the analogy with the dim sum, because you can say, keeping within that theme, that when you go to dim sum, you don't get 4 orders of the pork buns, unless you're me. I kind of do that because I'm weird. But you get small quantities of a variety of different things, and that generally creates a more pleasant dim sum experience for you. It also creates a more pleasant experience for your students. I would also make sure that you're looking for a variety of viewpoints and voices. I think that one of the main criticisms of a Principles of Economics course, especially that's come up in the last few months, is that we're very ideologically biased, which I find funny because I've never seen a principles class that I find particularly biased, at least not in the ways that people are talking about. But especially because this is becoming an increasing concern among students, you really want to maintain credibility with the students. So for example, if you're pulling a bunch of articles that the students feel all support a certain viewpoint or a certain ideology, they're going to be turned off to that. So you want to be sensitive, even if you're not biased in any way yourself, you want to be particularly sensitive to that to make sure you're not creating that impression for your students. And that comes back to the idea of you want to curate the content that you're providing to your students, again, to clarify rather than just highlight the fact that obviously there are a lot of issues on which economists disagree, and that's fine. That debate is very, very meaningful and very, very important. It's sometimes overwhelming, again, for a first-year principles student to see economists arguing with each other all the time. That's not necessarily the first thing that you want to present to them if you want them to think of economics as a coherent discipline. I said the RSS reader is your friend. I think it's also incredibly important to not let it get out of control, to make a conscious effort every day to go through the headlines and see what's current. Because then not only do you not end up with thousands and thousands of things that you haven't gone through, but you're able to present content to your students in a more timely fashion. That you're able to say, here's something that was in the news yesterday, or here's something that was blogged about yesterday, versus here's something that was blogged about 2 weeks ago, in which case your students just naturally would have less interest in that. And it's something that's pretty easy once it becomes a habit, whether you go through it in the morning for the previous day's news, or you go through it at night for that day's news. And really all you have to do in a lot of cases is skim through the headlines and see which things could be particularly relevant for your course. One thing that's oftentimes overlooked if you're looking for examples and content to use in your courses is blog archives. And I know this is hard to believe, but all of these blogs have been in operation before the current semester. So we have a lot of stuff that we've been doing for a number of years. Some of it is outdated because it relates back to current events, of course. But some of it is pulling out, whether it be funny things or just generally interesting things that stand the test of time. You actually might want to pull those. So you definitely want to use the blog archives as a resource, and most blogs are easily searchable either directly on the site or via Google for those purposes. The last thing I want to say as an instructor, regardless of whether you're blogging yourself or you're looking to use the blogs of others, is the best thing that you guys can do both for yourselves and for us up here is to join the community. When you're reading these blogs, don't just be a consumer, be a contributor. And provide the comments, provide the feedback, because especially as someone who's trying to provide examples and principles content to everyone out here, I want to know what you guys want to hear about. I want to know what you guys want to know. And I also want to know what you know. And I want to have this be a two-sided discussion, and I think that most blog authors would agree with me on that principle. So don't just be a consumer, be a producer, really join that community, because we'd love to have you.